Yeah. So this is Brit and Rupert. We're doing going to do a movie sort of channel. And if you're sort of familiar with us from the State of Plays on the Kingdom of Cards channel, they're going to be moving across to a new channel, which is going to be called The Men Who Talk, which is an amazing and abrupt title. Yeah, I was thinking oh, The Men Who Talk. I like that. But then I thought, should it be The Men That Talk?
Um, I don't think, in terms of like just basic like understanding of what the sentence means, I don't think it matters. So
It tickles me because I imagine the sentence being told in like a horror film, like a father bursting into the child's room and the kid screaming, "What is it?" And then the kid says, "The men who talk." And it's like, "Oh, right." But then I was thinking, would it be more frightening if she says, "The men that talk"? But then who talk sounds a bit more awkward, so it makes it better.
yeah, men who talk, it flows better as a sentence, but the men that talk, those men that talk, it sounds a bit thick.
Like then he went down the shop, then he got some milk, then he went home, that kind of thing.
He spoke to the men that talk.
But if it was
Yeah.
who got some milk, who went back home?
I think we should just spend this whole first episode just talking about the title of it, really.
Because what people have been clamoring for over the last few months.
So basically, the gaming podcast is called State of Play, and we're old veterans at that. But we thought, because we end up watching so much trash movies, especially during the lockdown, we thought, well, and we talk about them quite a lot. Why not talk about them to other people and become the men that talk?
Yeah, I think that our sort of, to give a brief overview on not why we're qualified for this, but where we sort of came from, like without for our love of films, was I grew up basically just watching bad action films because my parents still watch stuff like will happily just still watch like Tango and Cash of an evening and stuff like that. Like that's their jam. And when I was in my late teens, I worked in a video store, which was just awesome and clearly the best job I've ever had. Because it was a failing independent store, so it was like really quiet, and I just watched films all day.
Oh, it's a struggle. Those nurses think they got it hard.
I know, but it was amazing, and it's just that was when I really watched, because of course used to get, they were called the time codes in, and it was all like the copies of films that smaller production companies would send to video stores to see if they want to stock the film.
Oh, really?
So
Like screeners? Oh,
yeah,
right.
like time codes, yeah, screeners, and so it would have like the numbers at the bottom and stuff, and it would roll across that it was a screener, and we would just basically keep them because they would never ask for them to be sent back. So the staff used to just share them out amongst themselves. I used to have about 400 or 500 at one point.
Yeah.
All crap, obviously. all of them starring Jimmy Nail or Robin Shue. So
yeah. So I come to it from a slightly different place, I suppose, because I did a film degree at university, and I didn't really use it.
Protractor, actually. I forgot
What's
to
that?
mention. I did a film protractor.
Wow. Yeah. So yeah, and then I didn't really use it until I started like reviewing films for various websites. I think I started with Rock and Reel Reviews, and then went on to Nerdly and Critical Critics, American site. And to be honest, that was where my real interest in like 80s trash horror came from, because I just got sent all of their like Arrow stock, so I had to do like reviews of all these real like C-list movies, and it was brilliant, and they're amazing. But yeah, so up to that point, I was more into like Kubrick and Hitchcock and stuff.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I think you get a different sense of satisfaction watching films that are trash, but there's like a real primitive joy that comes out of them when you watch them. You just when there's like a really bad edit or like constant Dutch angles or just really badly delivered dialogue, I think good.
Yeah. But there's also like there are some real hidden gems out there as well. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a later episode. But yeah, and I do think I genuinely believe that like horror is the purest of all genres in terms of film, because it touches on so many. It's the reason why so many young filmmakers start out with horror, is because it uses so many of the kind of techniques that come into other genres, and it touches on everything in terms of like just the technical aspects, like cinematography, the use of editing, the use of makeup, these sorts of things. But then on top of that, you've got to write a script which is efficient and is all about showing, not telling, that sort of thing. So it's good training, I think, and that's why you get so many of these young filmmakers making horror movies, which is why it's such an overstuffed genre.
I
So I
think
do
as
think
well,
it's very pure filmmaking.
it's also, I think, got when you watch a horror film that's okay,
Yes.
because so much horror is bad. Like a horror film that's decent is almost like a higher accolade and recommendation than if you said you watched a comedy that was okay.
Yeah.
Because with a comedy that's okay, it just means that like you didn't turn it off, but you didn't laugh.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas like if horror film's okay, it's like there are some moments in it that that stood out, or you think, oh, that was quite
Yes.
cool. And
And
those,
and
yeah.
potentially could stay with you in a way that wouldn't happen with other films. In a way, like you could have like a pretty lame horror film, but then have one awesome tension scene or one awesome jump scare or something like that, and it could really stick with you in a way. It
Mm.
could reverberate. Whereas if you watch like just a bad drama movie or something like that, then it's like, well, nothing's going to really stay with you, is it? You're
Yeah.
just going to think, I'm not convinced by this at all.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many films that I remember watching, and it's so something I wouldn't watch. But I remember coming home from work when I used to house share with our mutual friend Alex, and he put on the Duchess, and I sat there and is it the Duchess with what's her name, Keira
Right?
Knightley? And I
Yeah.
sat there and watched it, and I watched it for like I think it was on for like 5 or 6 hours, and I just thought I'm feeling nothing.
Why? Why? Why
I
did you
don't know.
watch it?
I think it's because I don't watch those films, and I thought it just happened to. I came in from work, I sat down, had a coffee, and I thought, oh, do you know what? I'll just watch it. And
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of dramas that really straight dramas, especially period dramas, are something that they just it's kind of like mafia films or war films. They don't tick my boxes. I never get involved at any level.
Yes, yeah, I know what you mean, but I'd say there are good examples of all different types of genres. I wouldn't say there's any particular genre not I'd not indulge, but yeah.
Oh, I would literally power marathon through like Matthew McConaughey's romantic comedy back catalogue without a second thought. But yeah, there are
Would
yeah
we,
there
wouldn't we all?
haven't we all? So yeah, so I suppose we're going to do this in very much the way of the state of play, where we'll just there are going to be films we've both seen and ones we haven't seen. In fact, the list I've made today, I don't know how many of them, and the same for you, I don't know
Mm,
if we how many of them we've both seen.
yeah, that should be interesting. So it'd be very much like Stay Play, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you wanna kick off?
Yeah, I was gonna just it's one I know that we've both seen this one. So but my wife had not seen it.
Okay.
Is Upgrade, uh,
Yes.
directed by Lee Wannell, the guy who I knew he had some connection with James Wan. I didn't really. He wrote the
So
first.
it
Yeah,
was.
he wrote the first three Saw films and the Insidious films, and his directorial debut was the third Insidious film, which I haven't seen, but I'm interested in seeing it now because he is a real talent. Because he made Upgrade, and then he went on to do The Invisible Man, which is very good as well.
Did
Uh,
the Insidious films, are they the ones with our man Patrick Wilson in?
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Patrick, I fancy him Wilson.
Yeah.
And also,
Speaking of men I fancy, Upgrade stars Logan Marshall Green, and he looks like Tom Hardy. So basically, in the space of like that 90 minutes watching that film, like there's two men who my wife fancies more than me, basically Logan Marshall Green and Tom Hardy, because they're basically the same person.
yeah, I saw Logan Marshall Green for the first time in a film called The Invitation in 2015.
Yeah,
And that was, you must have seen that.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's creepy.
that was a really good film, and that's just one where he's just it's just his line of sight all the time, like the way he's there, and it's only seems to be him that thinks, is this a bit off? And he's
Yeah.
just constantly like looking at people as they speak, and then looking at other people to see if they're thinking the same thing as him. Like, should we go? So
Once you get over the fact that he would have just left so early in that place, once you get over that, it's hilarious. Like the tension, it's brilliant. Yeah, but with Upgrade, I just love it. It's like a kind of it's like an action movie with kind of with a kind of AI twist in it. But what I like it how it's very ultra modern in terms of its kind of technology concerns with regard to like AI and free will and stuff. But also, yeah, also it's kind of an 80s throwback in terms of its style and its tone and its just efficiency of storytelling. So I like that a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it feels like a film with like a lot of really top notch sort of set pieces in, but they're very understated.
Yes.
It's not like it's not like they go into an area and you think, oh, here we go, there's going to be a big fight. They're very kind of underplayed, and they have much more
Yeah.
of an impact because of that.
And there was obviously there are scenes where like kind of the AI is taking over and making him fight in a very very like efficient and brutal way. But what I liked is what they could have done is turned it into like almost like he turns into a superhero and it been all flashy and stuff. But what I like is that it's shot in a very brutal, quick, swift way, like the way kind of a computer thinks, rather than it being like, oh, look how awesome this is. It's like this is awesome, but in a very kind of scary and uh, sort of brutally efficient way.
It reminded me a little bit of some of the fight sequences in it reminded me, in a good way, of the very first Taken film, where Liam Neeson was literally just dropping people as quickly as he could to move on to his goal, where
Right.
it's just like a couple of movements, slam the head into a sink, and then they're out, and then he just moves on. It's not about like clumsy. Oh, obviously there are some clumsy moments in it, but it reminded me of that kind of like
Yes.
efficient, drop them, move on sort of thing. How quickly can this fight
Which
be
is what
ended?
you'd do if you wanted to like
Yeah.
take someone down. We'll talk about the other side of that, the other end of that, when we talk about Jack Reacher in a bit. But yeah, okay. Should we crack on with your first mention?
Well, obviously, I like that. This when we look back in years and at how this sort of channel and podcast started. I'm really proud that I'm going to say that the first film I mentioned was Final Destination 5, because that film I watched the other day, and it was one of those things. It was on like Netflix or something, and I was just probably hungover, and I thought, right, let's just watch it. It seems I just want something I can kind of just ghost my way through, if you know what I mean.
Is this
And
the one? This must have been the one before they just reset it to Final Destination.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure they did. They just called one of them Final Destination. It must have
This
been
was
after
like
that.
this was this one was the fifth film, is actually pretty good for just a film to just sort of sit through if you're in the mood for just, because it's very much, apparently the third and fourth films are really bad, but the
Right.
fifth one is completely on board with how it is perceived by the audience. So you there's a lot of like obviously everyone knows that the Final Destination, they cheat death, and then they basically are getting caught up by death to be killed again.
Yeah.
So of course there's lots of sequences where someone will like go into a dentist or something, and then it'll cut to like a I don't know, like a wobbly event above them with a fan rotating, and then it'll cut to like a dodgy like electrical cable on the floor in a puddle, and they
Yeah.
suddenly take their shoes off and socks for no reason. You're like, hang on, but then
It's basically like the first 20 minutes of an episode of Casualty, but just spread out to like 2 hours, isn't it?
so it was fun, and there's like some little twists on it and stuff, and it's because it doesn't take itself seriously. It's like a decent watch.
Yeah.
The CG in it isn't particularly it's above Event Horizon levels, but it's
Right.
there's sequences, isn't it, especially with the gore and the blood, where it's clearly they've just said, I'll just CG that in, and it's really weightless.
Yeah.
So
Well,
but
it doesn't really need CG, does it? I don't know.
no, but they're like the sort of event that kicks off the film of a bridge collapsing like has some pretty nice moments in it. But then, of course, like when it's zoomed out, and you're like, oh, that's kind of cool. That's quite epic in scale. And then when it gets a bit closer to the action, you think, yeah, that's just really weightless. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's got like a lot of red herrings in it of how the deaths and like some nice foreshadowing and stuff, and it ties itself up with the first film at the end. So it's
All right.
like, right, that cycle is done. I would never watch it again, but if someone said I fancy chucking something on, I would recommend it for that purpose.
Right. Yeah, they're very formulaic. I don't see how you can mess it up really when it comes to Final Destination, because really all you need, when you're writing a film like that, you'd surely just sit down, think of a bunch of like scenarios, really, don't you? And then just like tie them all together into some
Much,
kind of
much like So. I hope Lee Wannell is listening. It's
yeah,
it tickles me because the scenes in it, of course, because death is just like not present in the film as an entity.
yeah,
It tickled me in the film how they would get together and like try to understand what was happening, and try to like outthink death and do these outlandish things to kind of to skip their turn. But it's based on absolutely nothing. Like they've got no, they just assume these things are happening, and then they think, well, obviously, we can just outguess it. And you think,
yeah.
I don't think that's going to work, guys.
It seems
So
pretty supernatural.
it's pretty, it's making a real concerted effort. But yeah, it was good. It was a good watch.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for my next mention, something I've watched very recently is the most nonsensical mainstream film I think I've ever seen, which is called Face Off from
Oh yes,
1997.
yes. This one I'm
John
familiar
Woo,
with.
part of his, it must have been one of his last. No, I suppose he went on to do Mission Impossible 2. I don't know what else he did in
You know
America,
what his
but
favorite cocktail is?
Woo Woo.
Yeah, they call him John Woohoo. Don't
Yeah,
Google it. Don't Google it.
no. Um, No. So yeah, face. So this is the one with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage.
And
What?
Thomas Jane.
And Thomas
Thomas.
Jane is in it briefly. So yeah. So which one does it start with? So John Travolta is the nice guy. Nicolas Cage is like the hardened criminal, and it like John Travolta's been basically hunting him down his whole career. And he killed his son ages ago, and so it's like a big revenge thing. So it starts off with a ridiculous action scene where basically they do end up capturing Nicolas Cage's character. And anyway, like basically they need to take down his criminal empire and that. So they instantly decide that what they're going to do is swap faces. Now they don't think they don't really explore other avenues. They just think, right, let's just swap faces because they've got this new technology which allows them to one to put the face on the other. Yeah. So of course John Travolta becomes sorry. Yeah. So John Travolta is now wearing Nicolas Cage's face.
Haven't they got ridiculous names as well? Like, isn't he called like Cash Handbag or something?
I can't remember. It's Castor Troy, I think is
Castor Troy. That was it.
And I can't remember the other one, Archer or something. But it's Castor Troy, and his brother is Pollux Troy, of course. Yes. So yeah. Anyway. But yeah. So already it doesn't really make an awful lot of sense anyway. But apparently, Dave was telling me this, my friend Dave, our friend Dave, that apparently it was written by as a kind of futuristic sci-fi film,
right?
Which would explain
which is at the start.
It would explain why it is that you've got this technology in the first place. It also explains why it is that Nicolas Cage ends up in this secret prison with magnetic boots, and of course when he gets the way he gets out of the prison, like by starting a riot, and we see, and basically Nicolas Cage, so he's like really desperate, like people dying all over the place. He emerges on top of this prison, and he realizes he's on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean. So it kind of the camera like pulls back, and it shows that he's in the middle of the ocean. It's an impossible predicament. He's like totally screwed, and he's like shouting into the sky. And then the next scene, he's just on the mainland, wet, like he's just swam home. I don't. He must have just started swimming and
if
thought,
Sean Connery can do it in The Rock, then Nicolas Cage can do it in Face Off.
It's amazing. But I need to mention the ending as well. But it's a massive spoiler.
It's fine, but that film's from what, 1997?
1997. I think anything over 20 years has got to be.
that can be the cutoff.
But just to really, really hammer home how nonsensical it is, and how many times I just looked at the screen and thought, what? Like, because at the end, obviously everything turns out okay, and John Travolta returns to his family with his face back on.
His face in a bag.
Yeah.
Look at it back, love.
Yeah. So then, right. So bear in mind that the other guy, Nicolas Cage's character, has been trying to kill him his whole life, basically. Shot his son and raped his wife, right? So, of course, John Travolta rocks up at the door and says, "Hi, honey, I'm home," and then reveals that he's just adopted Nicolas Cage's son. I mean, I know that,
which is something that he wouldn't be able to do without her consent or
and it would
signature
be,
anyway.
yeah, exactly. He wouldn't be able to do it without. He probably wouldn't be able to do it anyway because of the fact that he would just go back into the system rather than going to this cop who has a specific interest in his father. But also, you might want to have a chat with his wife about it.
If I murdered someone by shoving them onto the propeller of a boat, and then I turned around, picked up my phone, and said, "I want to adopt his son," actually, you know, the child services would say, "Hang a banger."
I think it's because his wife's like, "Oh, how lovely," and I'm thinking, really? Because she'd be like, "Hang on, every time I look at that child, aren't I going to think about the man who took my husband's face and raped me?" Am I? Is
Two things here. I'm just getting flashbacks. Isn't his wife? Is it like Dan Lane?
No, it's Joan Allen, isn't it?
Joan Allen. And yeah, that's fine. And his daughter is Elizabeth.
It's Dominic Swain, isn't it? Dominique Swain.
Oh, is it? I'm thinking of a different.
Yeah,
but yeah, what I remember from that is that bloody hand thing he does on everyone's face, which is really irritating. It's like if you do that, you've got
oh my god, face. Yeah, he's like strokes his hand down people's faces as a loving gesture, and it's like, yes, well, isn't that convenient that you're just about to take each other's faces off?
It's character building, Rupert. It's part of his character.
Another thing that Dave mentioned was that the film was going to be a vehicle for Patrick Swayze and, get this, Wesley Snipes. I think I've got logistical questions there.
It'd have to be called Skin Off if that was the case, wouldn't it?
Well, Dave suggested it could be called Race Off, which could have been pretty good. Yeah, Skin Off. Yeah, they'd have to take all their skin off and just avoid salt the entire time. Yeah.
Can you imagine it? So John Travolta, Patrick Swayze. We need to get into Wesley Snipes' criminal empire. So what we're gonna have to do is tear all of your skin off.
Can I do an undercover thing? I don't know.
Can we backpedal?
Yeah.
So yeah, but the thing is,
yeah. Go on.
I was just saying that's a film I've probably seen like in my life, especially in my teens and 20s, easily like 20 or 30 times. And and watching it, I would say I watched it the last 5 or 6 years ago, and I just the scene that stood out for me is, and I think it's indicative of a lot of stuff from that era, is just the tonal unevenness of like what was socially acceptable, like the bit where he's at the start where he's just like squeezing an underage girl's bum as she's singing in like a choir, and he's like making this orgasmic face. And it's like, how much does that add to the character, though?
Yeah, I mean, they talk about you know what it reminded me of? It was a Michael Bay movie. It really did. The way that John Woo shoots his action scenes and the amount of slow motion and the way he screws the frame, so to speak. It really makes it look like a Michael Bay movie, at his most crass and tasteless. But also, I couldn't.
That came from the same person who did Hard Boiled.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's so over the top. But weird as well. And it's such a creepy idea anyway. Especially all the stuff where he's obviously in his house pretending to be John Travolta. It's really creepy. But I can't help imagining that there could have been another version of this movie, right? Directed by Paul Verhoeven, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone in the main roles. It would have been amazing. It could have been made in 1988. Would have been incredible.
It would have been even better if Nicolas Cage had done an impression in the film of John Travolta circa 1989 to 1993. So he's just sat in his living room with no work, looking at his letterbox, waiting for a script to come through.
Yeah. Waiting for Tarantino to knock on his door.
waiting for Quentin.
That sounds like a slow burning drama, doesn't
it? Sorry, what were you going to say before I?
No, I think it would have been really cool. I'd love to see like a Verhoeven version, because Verhoeven, of course, would have said it in the future. It would have been really cool, and no more ridiculous than John Woo's version, because I don't
But
know what.
it would have had like a subtext and just something to say, as
Yeah,
opposed, yeah.
as opposed to just being completely bonkers and off the wall, which I suppose is good in its own way. So
Yeah,
yeah, Face
it's
Off
not a
would.
boring film. It's not a
No,
boring film by any means, but
and you could probably watch it again and again and get something out of it every time. Nothing good, but you get something out of it. So yeah, that's Face Off.
well, my next film is going to really change gears now and bring it up to sort of like AAA grade movie making. So I watched 2002's High Crimes with Ashley Judd and Morgan Freeman, and it was one of the films I had to watch it because I consider myself like a connoisseur of thrillers and action films from like the 80s up to around 2000. And when I thought Morgan Freeman and Ashley Judd in a film that isn't Kiss the Girls, so I had to watch it, and it's like a procedural courtroom sort of thriller, but with like a militaristic bent on it, because the whole kind of plot is her husband isn't who he says he is. It's Jim Caviezel.
Of
Um,
course.
but a man who I know from a film, but I can't place what film I first saw him in.
Passion of the
So
Christ.
it definitely wasn't that. And it definitely wasn't Ginger Dead Man 2 Passion of the Crust, I'll tell you that. So,
And it probably wasn't The Thin Red Line either, because that's a war movie, so you probably haven't seen that.
although Nick Nolte's in that, so that is one I need to tick off my list.
Everyone, every actor who's ever lived is in that film.
Craigie Moses. So yeah, High Crimes comes on, and the whole point is Jim Caviezel. Sorry, I'm going to cough. One sec. Jim Caviezel. There's a break-in at the house at the start. They're kind of happily married, and they take the fingerprints because there's been a break-in. It's just some kids. They jump out the window. They break through the window with like a small coffee table, right? When Jim Caviezel sees them, and it's clearly they've got this huge house, this kind of like real, totally glass-fronted house overlooking the ocean, because she's like obviously like a really high-class lawyer. And they see him and they throw a light balsa-wood coffee table at the window, and it's clearly single glazed. You just think, well, if that was double glazed, and it would have bounced off, and Jim Caviezel would have just beat them up. Boom, film done. So the point is, they take Jim Caviezel's fingerprints. They look around at the windows and say, "Is that single glazing?" And then and then he's like, "Yeah, I can hear everything." And then they turn. When they run his fingerprints, they realize he's not who he says he is, and he's actually someone who's wanted for war crimes from like a decade ago, because they reckon he massacred a village of innocent people and lost his mind. So,
Okay.
so she obviously takes his side. He's like, oh, "I'm being framed," and then it goes into like a military courtroom where she's just completely out of her depth, and obviously she needs Lieutenant Adam Scott to help her sort of get through it all. And there's a lot of things going on. You get Amanda Peet turns up, who is she's pretty, she is a
Yeah.
spoiler alert, but and Morgan Freeman turns up as like a recovering alcoholic who's like a sort of a maverick retired sort of military lawyer.
Mm.
And all the pieces are there for a classic generic thriller, but it's really odd. Like the whole film, it does that thing where people act mysteriously for no reason. So
Ah,
she's talking to someone, and they're like really sort of closed off and hiding and suspicious, and then there's loads of men just like watching her from outside, and then they're nothing to do with anything, and you think, well, why are we focusing on this then? All these red herrings, these constant red herrings. And then it gets to the end of the film, and I'm not going to ruin it because it's not 20 years old yet, but there's a there's like a twist, and you think, what? And it's really unsatisfying, and it's one of those films where you can't solve it yourself. It's all kind of like just revealed in the last couple of minutes, and you think, well, like, okay, I couldn't really guess that. And if that is what happened, why is this parade of people that I've been introduced to either not involved at all, or acting so suspiciously?
right. Yeah. So it's
It's
very
it's
forced.
it's
The
a
kind of
very
drama.
it's contrived sort of yeah. So there's a whole sequence in it as well, like where one person on a legal team does something, and he is seen and recorded doing this thing, and then something else happens later on that kind of basically doubles down on what he did, and they just
Yeah.
sort of forgive him. And I thought, but he's like, "I told you I didn't do it," and they're like, "Yeah, but we saw you. I saw you do it." So don't say you didn't. Yeah, it wasn't very satisfying. But again, worth a watch.
Would you say so? It sounds like it almost cheats a bit. I don't like those sorts of twisty thrillers where they cheat the audience and there's no way of knowing. There's no way of kind of if a film like that needs to is going to succeed, it needs to kind of be smarter than the audience, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
Like cleverer, so that when you get to that point where it's like, I get what's happening, it's like, oh well, that's clever, I've been done here. But what's really unsatisfying is when you get to that point and it's just cheated you, and it's like, well, I had no way of knowing. No way of working
what it
out.
should do if it was a well-written film, when it would drip feed you information, and then you'd think, oh, I see.
Right. Yeah.
But to just kind of like give you a load of stuff, and it also does that thing where there's one person in the film, I'm not sure the actor's name actually, but he's really sort of combative towards everything, and then the moment that like the reveal happens, his and other characters totally change. Like they've read the script and thought, all right, I don't have to be suspicious anymore, so now I can just be a normal person because I don't have to keep the tension up.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So it really.
So it's almost like
the hair as well changes color and length. She is wearing a syrup in some scenes. You're like, what is happening with your hair, woman?
What else was she doing at the time? Was she shaving her head like Kim Cattrall in Split Second?
Which, well, we'll have to talk about next now you've said that.
That film. Oh my god.
Do you want to move on to it, or do you want to do something else first?
Well, I mean, now we've mentioned Split Second, I suppose we should. I guess we don't have to spend too long on it because I mean it's a preposterous film.
It was a film I saw when I had food poisoning a few months ago, and I was like, do you know when you're sort of so feverish that you just kind of, I couldn't concentrate, so I just put on a load of films that I didn't have to focus on. But when I got to Split Second with Rutger Hauer, Kim Cattrall, Alistair Duncan, Pete Postlethwaite,
Alan Armstrong.
This amazing cast, and it was so uneven. I had to take, even through my fever, I thought, this is amazing. I have to watch this again with Rupert,
because it's basically so it's, when was it made? Like late 90s, late 90s? Oh, it was early 90s, was it? Yeah. So British made sci-fi thriller set in 2008, The Far Future, where London is supposedly flooded, but it's just a bit damp. There's not really anything else. Or like it has literally overhead shots of the city and it looks fine.
Yeah, and then when they will go into the streets, they're wearing wellies.
And so Rutger Hauer plays like the worst cop in the world, worst detective in the world, going around like not, and shouting at people, getting really angry, like losing control all the time, not able to catch the person who did it even though they're right there, and talking to dogs, like he couldn't. He was like at the start of the film. He tries questioning people in the club, but then he just ends up focusing on this dog. He keeps saying, "You saw something, didn't you?" It's like, well, why are you?
It doesn't really matter if he sees
something whether it sees something or not. It wouldn't be enforceable in a court of law anyway. So what are you doing? And he's awful. And the captain, who plays the captain? It's not Pete Postlethwaite. It's someone else, isn't it?
It's Alan Armstrong.
Is it Alan Armstrong? Yeah, it is as well. Yeah. Alan Armstrong plays this like police chief, and he's constantly having a go at him, saying, "What are you doing? You're out of control. You discharged your firearm at a murder scene, all sorts." And it's like, why not just sack him? Because he's a massive liability. He's not catching like the killer, and in fact, the only reason why he comes into contact with the killer is because the killer's after him.
Yes, as outwitted him. And that sequence as well, that amazing sequence where it cuts back to like the whole reason for this kind of revenge mindset he's got is when he's in like a sewer, like a waterlogged sewer with his partner, and he's looking directly at him, and his partner just gets like pulled underwater, even though he's standing on concrete,
instantly straight downwards, like straight in a really shocking way.
And then it cuts to Rutger Hauer, and he's looking around like he's in like a group viewing of a house he has a mild interest in, and it's just, there's no shock. He doesn't search for him. He just kind of looks around like, oh, that was a bit, oh, is he gone? And then it just cuts to the future and he's traumatized.
Yeah, like he's staring at a bit of wall in this house, thinking, is that mold or is that just slight discoloration?
Or is that where the light's coming through the window and it's just a
Yeah,
shadow?
yeah. It's just like just mild, possible perturbation, but not sure.
But where you're
But
talking,
it's
you
like
mentioned Kim
literally
Cattrall
just
as well,
oh
where she's just wearing a wig, and it's never, and the camera really like luxuriously hones in on the fact she's wearing a wig,
and he
and
keeps
it's never
touching her
revealed.
hair and everything.
He
He keeps
he
stroking
keeps
her hair.
revealing where she shaved her sideburns. He's like pulling the hair back as he's stroking it, because like he's thinking, is that a syrup? But then yeah, and there's no reason for Kim Cattrall to be in the film. Like she exists purely as like the sex object. And also the whole point is like she turns to Rutger Hauer because wants she kind of wants closure on a husband going missing who was his partner, and he takes her in because he's like there for his partner, and then they just fall in love. So they completely just like just
Yeah.
quack on his memory anyway, and just it's like, oh, this
Yeah,
is what it,
right. I didn't even think of that because she goes back to his place and it is disgusting. It's properly foul.
he is not going to get his bond back.
Yeah, it's not like just a bit kind of like sparse or just a bit
Neglect,
yeah, neglect. It's not. It's actively unhygienic and unpleasant. Like it's
full of rotting food,
yeah,
birds.
like chocolate stuck to the fridge in a pattern and stuff. It's weird because of course
Which she eats off the
because he's
fridge.
constantly eating chocolate for some reason.
Yeah,
But
I don't
yeah,
know.
on top of that, like for some reason she's like really attracted to him for whatever reason. Like this slob, this unpleasant misogynist slob who's like probably 20 years older than her or whatever. And it's like and of course like the partner of her ex as well. So it's like there's many reasons why she would not be attracted to him.
And if you think about it, like the fact that her ex who went missing, like her husband, is when you do see him in the flashback, he's like a really clean cut, kind of good looking, svelte, pleasant man. So it's not like they were similar.
And it's not even like it's not like they particularly share this. I mean, they obviously share this grief, but they're dealing with it in such different ways, and so it's not even like they can meet on that level. And on top of that, his partner,
Alistair Duncan.
Alistair Duncan, who he comes along and he's presented as this total nerd sort of thing, and I was assuming that what would happen is that the more time these two spent together, it would be like a kind of like a two-way thing, like him and Rutger Hauer, where Rutger Hauer, where the nerdy guy kind of learns a bit about how to kind of man up from Rutger Hauer. But on the other hand, Rutger Hauer learns a bit about being a nicer person generally, and just being a bit more empathic. But no, that doesn't happen at all. What happens is that the nerdy guy just becomes really unpleasant and slobbish, just like him. And that's it. That's all.
And it's kind of celebrated.
Yeah, oh, now he's a real man. But he was much more pleasant and probably more effective as a policeman before he changed his ways.
Yeah.
Astonishing film.
But yeah, it definitely, if you like these kind of ridiculous sort of early to mid 90s like just action films, it's entertaining.
Oh yeah, and it's perfect. It's perfect like for those like because it's like probably under 90 minutes and it's perfect for those nights where you're watching with others and just questioning everything you see, which is brilliant. Because every shot, it's like, what? Why
is this happening?
Love it.
So yeah, Split Sec was an absolute classic.
Brilliant film of the week.
I'm just moving on to my next one now. I watched. You haven't seen this, have you? Mandy with Nicolas Cage.
I started watching it, but I haven't finished it yet.
Okay. For what reason? Just time constriction?
Just time, really, because it's something that my wife would definitely not enjoy. So it's definitely something I'll be watching on my own.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Then we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah. Okay. I'll finish watching it because it does seem really good. Well, it seems very stylish.
Well, if I'm going to have to skip over Mandy, Rupert, I'm going to have to go to my next film, which is Firewall with Harrison Ford from 2006. So.
God, I remember when I didn't even know it was that recent. I literally thought it was earlier than that.
There's the period of Harrison Ford's life which I'm most familiar with because obviously it was like when I worked in the video shop, and you could take a snapshot of Harrison Ford in Firewall and show it to someone and then say, okay, what film is this? And they'd say, well, it's either Firewall or it's Air Force One or it's Patriot Games, and they would just list all those films that he was in where he effectively played the same character.
Yeah.
And this is very much in that sort of mold, with the difference being that obviously the main antagonist in it is Paul Bettany, and one of those films where he's like a works security for a bank, and his family get kidnapped and held ransom in his house, and he has to kind of take down the bank security and transfer all this money everywhere.
Tell me there's hacking. Tell me there's computer
Oh,
hacking.
there's so much hacking, and hacking to the level of saying, "Oh, what's that on over there?" And then someone looks away, boom, he's turned off all the cameras on their keyboard, and
On a
and
Windows-based machine,
yeah,
typing stuff in.
yeah. So yeah, they've got deluxe page open. He's typing, boom, all the doors are open, and yeah, just so many sequences that are there to add tension, like a whole thing where, like Paul Bettany, right? The whole reason is Paul Bettany has got a gang of like these operatives who have got his wife and child at home, and Harrison Ford's got a camera and a microphone on him, and if he does anything, he will just kill his family. And yet Paul Bettany just decides to like add another layer to things by like going into the bank with him, making him show him around the bank. So then they have to kind of in the final sequence go around turning off all the cameras and deleting all the hard drives. When if Paul Bettany had just said, well, there's you've got enough things to worry about, so I'll just stay here because you're going to do what I say anyway.
Mm.
And there's so many sequences where like Paul Bettany would have just, when they try to escape, where Paul Bettany would have just, if he was serious, as he is at the end, where he suddenly loses his temper and is just out to kill them, if he had just shot his wife or like chopped a finger off one of his children, Harrison Ford would have literally done everything without second question. But because he kind of is like trying to be matey again to keep that sort of forced tension up, then it doesn't wash. But it's a perfectly workable thriller, but it's just Harrison Ford being mid 2000s Harrison Ford.
Yes, it was almost it. I don't know what it was that kind of, because now we all know that he's kind of looks like someone who's lost interest in acting. There's like nothing but in his eyes at all, and I don't know whether it's because he did all those kind of very middling films in the 2000s, or whether he'd already lost interest and then did those films, if you see what I mean. What I don't know, it's chicken and egg scenario, but either way, it's been a slightly depressing decline, because he did have something back in his younger years. I mean, you look at like some of his early films, like I always talk about when it comes to Harrison Ford, the Mosquito Coast. Actually, just the films he did with Peter Weir in the 80s, like Mosquito Coast and Witness, the one about the Amish people where he's just building houses. But yeah, he's so good, especially in Mosquito Coast. He's nuts in that film, and it's brilliant. And it's like, because it's all about him taking his family, like basically he's despairing at like modern American society. So he decides to take his family into the jungle and like start a new life there, sort of thing. And he's really desperate for this to work and like live off the land and stuff. And he just becomes like really, really militant about it, and he just goes bonkers basically in the jungle. And it's an amazing performance. But I really haven't seen anything like that, in his.
No, apart from 6 Days, 7 Nights with Anne Hesh.
Naturally.
Yeah, there's which is again him going bonkers in the jungle.
Yeah.
Or rather losing his temper in a jungle, I suppose, is a different. But yeah, there is a lot of there's just a lot of these films where another one I'll talk about in a minute, where I don't know, there's people of like actors of great stature and real capability do these films, and you think there's nothing to them.
And I have no problem with them doing like slumming it in these sorts of films, but you want them to, if they're going to be in stuff like that, elevate it in some way, like be like the best actor in the room or whatever, and sort of be in a position where it's like, oh, well, this is kind of trashy material, but they've managed to push it to another level. But it's too often, especially with like Harrison Ford or something, it's like, well, it's just a name, really, isn't it?
It could be any actor doing it. It could be Jim Caviezel.
It could be Jim Caviezel. Yeah. Yeah, that's depressing. But it's 2006. I suppose is there some good like retro tech in there? Or is it too new? I mean, you're gonna have CRT monitors and stuff, I suppose.
Oh, there was some serious CRT going on. It tickled me because, of course, he's got this house that's like ultra modern and all this security and
Yeah.
stuff. And then at the start, his daughter's just watching like a 14-inch CRT on a like of some like really bad rock group, like while she's eating cereal.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
Love
so
it. Yes, they've really struggled making hacking interesting, haven't they, in these thrillers? I mean,
oh, I will say that on this subject, tying in our two channels together, Ben Yahtzee Croshaw has
yeah.
written a game about hacking where the whole game is it's just all this stuff happens on the screen and you just type randomly on the keyboard and it hacks stuff. And that sounds really fun.
Yeah, there is I think there are websites out there where you can pretend to be a hacker, and basically it comes up with a screen and you just type in whatever and it automatically comes up with loads of stuff which is like real hacking code. It's quite funny.
Yeah, I do like the thought of that.
I wonder if they actually use that stuff in movies as well. The only decent hacking film I've really, like properly decent hacking film I've seen is probably Black Hat with by Michael Mann,
And
which
it's got
isn't.
Chris Hemsworth.
Yes,
Yeah.
and again, even then, like the hacking part's the worst part of it. It's just a decent thriller around it, and it shows that Michael Mann can still direct when he fancies it, when he's not directing on an iPhone or whatever he likes to do these days. Right, I'll move on to my next one then.
Okay.
Which is Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock, which I watched the other day. I'm gradually making my way through the Star Trek movies again, as we do. Now, there's this kind of rule that basically the odd-numbered Star Trek films are awful, and the even-numbered Star Trek films are good. Now, I like all the Star Trek films in some ways, but there is some truth in that kind of pattern, unfortunately, because Star Trek 2 was, of course, Wrath of Khan, and that is generally regarded as one of the best ones. It
Was
was
the fourth one The Voyage Home?
Yes,
I've never seen as
that
someone.
was the one. Oh, it's the most of its time because it's a really 80s one where they go back to the present
It's gonna be
to
the
save the
80s.
whales, and it's 86, of course.
Of course
And it's amazing. It's so dated because, of course, it's all really drawing attention to whatever like pop culture there was at the time or whatever fashions. But on top of that as well, there's this whole subplot about stealing nuclear warheads and stuff off like a Russian submarine. It's like kids watching that these days must be thinking, what's that? What? Russian? What?
Does it really focus on like the fish out of comedy humor as well?
Yeah, oh yeah, big
Oh,
time,
good.
massively.
Good. They're the strongest comedies.
It's got like Spock reprimanding some punks on a bus and stuff. So yeah, it's not a Russian like nuclear warheads, but this ridiculous sequence where they go and steal some nuclear warheads off an American like aircraft carrier, and of course they send in their one Russian character, Chekhov, and it's like, oh, the humor in that sequence when the Russian comes on board. Anyway, so yeah, that was from number 4, but number 2 was Wrath of Khan, and it was basically remade as Into Darkness. And it had a really good like intensity to it, but and it had a quite shocking ending in that spoiler alert, Spock.
Okay, it's over 20 years.
Spock dies in it, which is a really good sequence, a really quite nice moment where they're kind of saying goodbye through the glass sort of thing. So that's good. Now, the problem with The Search for Spock is it is quite blandly directed by Leonard Nimoy himself. And like Wrath of Khan had a really good baddie in Khan, but
who played Khan? I have to say at this point that I've never seen any Star Wars or Star Trek film, so I'm totally out of my depth here.
That's quite impressive. Yeah. So who was the one? Oh, it was Richard Montalban, Ricardo Montalban, the guy who played Khan. Anyway, but Search for Spock has Christopher Lloyd in like really heavy Klingon makeup. And the problem is that because the makeup's so heavy, he can't really emote too hard. So when he's getting angry, he just kind of like has a straight face. So it's sort of like a weirdly wooden performance from someone like Christopher Lloyd. He went so bonkers in like, Who Framed Roger Rabbit and like Back to the Future and that. It's weirdly wooden, so that's strange. And he doesn't have a clear motivation, so it's like not. Again, Khan had a good motivation. He just has no real motivation. he just seems to have it in for human beings and doesn't want them to have a nice life, and that's it really. But there's like it's structurally just a bit of a messed up movie in terms of like its kind of big emotional moments, because in Wrath of Khan, Kirk meets his son, his estranged son, who I don't think he's ever met before.
Is his name
And
Dirk?
I can't actually remember what his name is. Dirk Kirk. Yeah, so they meet in that one. So of course in this one you're thinking, well, it makes sense if it developed the relationship and like they have some sort of like repartee and that sort of thing. But no, in fact they're completely kept separate throughout the entire film on different planets. And then his son's just like murdered by one of the Klingons, and then he goes and finds his body, but that's it. It's like, well, you haven't built up this relationship enough for us to care, surely, because he's been estranged this whole time. You had a whole film to develop this relationship between Kirk and his son, and they didn't meet in the entire film. So it's ridiculous. So yeah, it isn't the best,
And you
unfortunately.
like it, you say?
Well, I like the whimsy of the Star Trek movies. Yeah, so it's not the best, no, but it's not the worst by any means.
I've only got two more to go through, and one of them is.
Well.
Oh, nice. Okay, one of them is one I think we've both seen, if that's not spoiling. So, the last one I've got again is a thriller from 2001 called "Don't Say a Word" with Michael Douglas, Famke Janssen, and yes, Sean Bean.
I don't think I have seen that.
It's worth a watch because there's a lot going on in this film. I was watching it, and at the start of the film, the heist that starts off the film. So Michael Douglas is a psychiatrist, like a world-known psychiatrist. Obviously, one of his best friends is Oliver Platt, which is always good. And
that was in every film.
his wife, Famke Janssen, who is clearly a quarter of a century younger than him, is like bed, but she's like hurt her leg in some accident, so she's like in bed in the New York apartment for the whole film. And so the premise is that Sean Bean is with like a gang who go on this heist into a bank, and they're there for a specific item in a safety deposit box. Now, I can't give spoilers because this film's only 19 years old. It doesn't come up to that 20-year mark, so I'll have to keep my cards close to my chest, I'm afraid. And so this heist goes off, and the whole point of it is like there's a lot of like someone shouting 90 seconds, 70 seconds, and then looking at a watch, and it's all like timed, to the beat. So what they do is when they get into the vault within 30 seconds, after like a really planned, like carefully planned robbery where no one's hurt, and they get into the vault, they get into the safety deposit boxes, they crowbar out the safety deposit box. And instead of just picking it up off the floor, because it's the sign of like a box that would have some high-tech silver shadows in it, and then jumping into the back of a van, just driving off and sorting it out at their leisure later on, they just empty the contents onto the floor and like really slowly go through it looking for this one jewel, instead of just making the most of the heist and just having all the money that's in there as well, all the other jewelry. So what happens then, of course, is one of his accomplices pockets it, switches it round, and they get double crossed, and then he buggers off, and then like Sean Bean like wants it back. So without giving any more background, it's a film that could have been avoided if they just said, should we just take this in the van and do this later on when the police aren't rushing towards us?
Yeah. So someone would come up with that idea,
in the plan,
in the team.
You can imagine them like in some warehouse. They've got like a big blackboard up, and Sean Bean's got like a laser pointer saying right then. So then we go in. We got 90 seconds before the police turn up. We've got this time to a T. We go in there. We get in there. We knock them down. We open the vault. We get in there. We crowbar out the safety deposit box, and this is key, guys. Pay attention to this. We slowly rifle through it. All of us gathered around, getting in each other's way. With gloves on, so it's really cumbersome as well.
And then someone holds up their hand to say something, and then Sean's like, I
haven't finished. So yeah, and then no one double crosses now. So the film is then, for reasons unexplained, Brittany Murphy. It's quite sad actually, because Brittany Murphy and the 8-year-old girl in it who plays, the 8-year-old girl who plays 56-year-old Michael Douglas. They both died quite young from drug overdoses, which is really. I think the little girl died when she was like 20 or something. It's really harsh. So watching it now, it's kind of sad. But Brittany Murphy is a pretty good partner. She's plays someone who's got these 6 digits locked in her head, and she won't tell anyone. So Michael Douglas is there to break down defenses, and get this number for Sean Bean for unknown reasons. Michael Douglas in that film wears makeup. He wears makeup. My girlfriend Faye is a professional makeup artist in the media industry, and I was watching it, and she was over my shoulder, like on her phone. And when Michael Douglas came on screen, she said, "Is he wearing bronzer?" And then every now and again she'd chime in with, "Has he got shimmer on his cheeks?" And when she said it, I could not see it. There are scenes in that film where he is actually wearing like really shiny lip gloss, and you think, what is happening? They've obviously tried to make him look younger, but it just ends up making him look like a cross-dresser. Like, like, it's really bizarre. And of course, there's lots of like real close-ups on him, and you think you're wearing makeup. You're a man wearing full makeup.
So yeah, he doesn't get to wear like a chain mail woolen jumper with a V-neck in a busy club.
Yeah, well, look, we would just look like someone's like stoned dad looking for his daughter because she's not supposed to be out. I know he's got like the sleeves, doesn't he, like pushed up, but it's so billowing and oversized they kind of like hang over themselves. But yeah, again, absolutely fine film. You have to really just suspend your disbelief because some of the stuff.
It's always troubling when something happens in literally the first scene which doesn't make sense and actually negates the rest of the film.
Yeah, and also kicks off the plot.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was again. I don't know. I don't know why I went through a phase of just watching all these dodgy thrillers. I must have just sometimes it has to happen. So
sometimes it's about a certain period. I think like it's not even a certain type of film. Sometimes I feel like I want to watch a film from like early 2000s or something like that. I don't know why. And then we watch like a series of them, and it's like it's weird, and you suddenly notice that imperceptible change in style that you wouldn't have noticed like as you just live life and watch movies regularly. But going back to a particular place in time, it's like, right, yeah, that wouldn't happen now.
I remember talking about this whole change in style. I remember what film did I watch with Faye? It was Argo. So we watched Argo like a few months ago, and she was like, "I really usually Faye just watches like horrors." She said, "I really enjoyed that. It was quite cool." And I said, "Oh, the thing is, in the 70s, there's a lot of like really really cool films like, the 3 Days of the Condor, starring." Oh my God, what's his name? Robert Redford. In that film, there's a scene where I think it's Jessica Lange is in a kitchen with him, and he's sitting at a bar at like the sort of island in a kitchen, and he's wearing double denim flares and cowboy boots, and he's got a shirt open halfway down, and he's drinking whiskey. And I thought, I would marry you. I would leave my life to be with you, Robert. Now, and so yeah, we watching that when I was talking about 3 Days of the Condor and stuff, and then. I said, "Oh yeah, another one that's really good is the parallax view."
Yeah.
And then she said, "Oh, what happens in that film?" And my like to suck her in and make her want to watch it with me. My like go-to scene was I said, "Well, there's an amazing sequence where Warren Beatty sits on the end of the bed in darkness, just smoking loads of fags."
Yeah, that's pretty much just sums up 70s filmmaking.
It is amazing. There's two sequences in that film, The Parallax View, that I always leap to. One of them is when he says to he's a journalist going undercover for this, like these weird murders that have been happening, and he says to his boss, "Look, we're gonna fake my death, take me off the books, tell everyone I'm dead. I'll be back in a week. Give me 10 grand of like money so I can go in and I'll crack this case." And it hard cuts to him sitting on his bed in darkness, smoking fags, panicking because he has no idea what to do next. And then the bad guys knock on his door and then come to him. And there's another sequence where someone says they're on a beach, and some drug lord says to him, with a henchman behind him holding a gun, who's about 6'8", says, "Oh, I'll tell you exactly what you need to know, but you have to leave all your personal belongings on the beach and come out with me on my ocean liner into the middle of the ocean, and then I'll tell you." And the look on his face suggests that he is not keen on the idea. It's like he's so out of his depth. Yes,
it reminds me of The Long Goodbye with Elliot Gould, where he's just like so out of his depth, and all the gangsters just in his house and like threatening him, and he's just a chain smoking nobody, and it's like he's no physical threat to them whatsoever. I love that stuff, and like those desperately like pathetic men, desperately pathetic, but also somehow cool men that you
It's the
had in like
same as like
70s
well, the 3
movies.
Days of the Condor is
Yeah,
with Robert, where he's just completely these things are happening and like he's getting attacked and he's no comprehension of why it's happening and
yeah,
he's trying to get the bottom of it. But what's good is you're drip fed information and there's not some stupid twist at the end. It reveals itself slowly,
yes,
which is the sign of a good film.
yes. So, well, my next one is a 70s film as well. Because I watched, I just had to watch Jaws again the other day, which I love, but I think it's pretty well established that it's
It's a
quite a
film I've
loved
only
film.
weirdly watched about 2 or 3 times, like a very long time ago. So
It is a very good film. It's just really, really nicely constructed from the script up, if you see what I mean. And I love the fact that it's, well, there's lots of things I love about it, but I do love the fact that it's like a film of two halves. That almost feels like two films for the price of one. The way that you've got this kind of like this unfolding drama thriller thing on to do with the town and kind of like trying to persuade the town mayor that this is something to take seriously, and then it just turns into like three dudes on a boat and it's a monster movie sort of thing.
good.
Yeah, I love it, and it's just really, really nicely detailed. Like the relationship between Brody and his wife is really, I've always found it convincing, and I think the older I get and the more married I am, you can see it. It feels like a lived-in relationship. The thing is, there aren't actually that many dialogue scenes between them, but it feels really kind of lived in. So that's really cool. And I always notice something new, because like all good movies, I always notice something new when I watch it again, sort of thing. And this time, it's this thing with the mayor, who is the one who's like saying, "Oh, there's nothing wrong. We got to keep the beaches open, etc., etc."
Yeah.
And so he starts off like this, and he constantly, right, has an unlit cigarette in his hand throughout and uh, throughout the first like hour or something, and then gradually he starts playing with the cigarette more and more. He never lights it. He never lights it, and he plays with it more and more as the tension kind of rises. And the moment when he lights it is the moment when he realizes the situation has got out of control, and he doesn't have control of it anymore, and he needs to close the beaches. And it's like that's the moment when he lights it in the middle of a hospital. Naturally, it is the 70s. But I just thought like little things like that is things that you probably you notice if you watch it over and over again, but they're kind of just under the surface to anyone watching it at any time, that you may not notice it, but it's there and it's clearly deliberate, because why else would
Would
that
that
happen?
happen?
So, yeah, so it's just really, really cool, and it's just a very, very good film. And of course, because they really struggled with like the kind of special effects and the sharks and that, it means that the actual kind of shots of the shark are very carefully chosen, and that makes it scarier, because it's like just a glimpse of the shark, like a fin here and there, or just see the eye or whatever, and it makes it scarier. Yeah, so that's a good movie.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought that? I think he'll go on to bigger
I
and
thought
better
one of the
things.
most celebrated films of all time would be good.
Yeah, but I think apart from Steven Spielberg's direction, obviously, in the way he uses actors and that, it's just the script is so good, and the kind of the triad of Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, and Roy Scheider. It's just
Yeah,
really cool.
that's a good try.
It is.
So that's a solid 6.5 out of 10, which is
Yeah.
also a good film. I do have one that I missed actually before we talk about the final film, because I think you've only got one left, haven't you?
I have only got one left. Yeah.
This is quite telling that I kind of forgot about it. The Color Out of Space, because
Oh yeah.
obviously riding high on Mandy, I thought I really need some more Nicolas Cage, because he went through a bit of a lull apart from Joe,
Mm.
and I think there was one other film I watched of his. He really,
Was it
I'm assuming
Knowing by any chance? Alex Proyas.
that was apt, and I thought I could watch that because I know that you said it was a load of nonsense, and then Sexy Dave, our friend, one night spent about an hour explaining why it's really, really worth a watch. And I
Dave
couldn't.
is a massive Alex Proyas apologist, though. To be fair,
What else has Alex Proyas done then?
I, Robot.
Right, carry on.
He did the Did he do the Crow? No,
Oh,
Dark City. He did.
Ralph.
If only he did. He did Dark City as well, which is I just find that all his films are like almost good. He did Gods of Egypt as well. My God, Gods of Egypt. Yeah. Yeah. So he did Dark City, which is quite well regarded, but
It's like Kiefer Sutherland and
Rupert
Grint.
Grint. No, is it? Is that his name?
Yeah,
Rufus Sewell, not Rupert.
Rufus
Yeah.
Sewell, yeah, I could see him. So the
And Richard
color,
O'Brien, naturally.
Natch. Um, so the color of space is based on a H.P. Lovecraft book, and I'm familiar with his works overall, but I'm not familiar specifically with stories, if you know what I mean. Like the most tips deep I've been is Call of Cthulhu on the Xbox, and but I'm familiar with the kind of his brand of cosmic horror, and what it's all about Nicolas Cage and his family, in this house that he's kind of moved back to the country to try and after his father's death to try and basically save money and to kind of get the farm going again and try to get back into that way of life.
Yeah.
And a meteorite lands in their garden, and these weird things start happening. And whilst it's very colourful and it's a very pretty film. Like it's kind of well presented, and Nick Cage's performance is wonderfully balmy. What I took away from it the most was what I enjoyed the most was the fact that what's happening to them is totally incomprehensible because it is in and of itself alien. Like the things that are happening, it's this unseen force that the things that happen to different family members, there's no correlation to how they affect each other. It's just this completely abstract concept that human minds clearly can't fully understand. And you do get that sense of like they're in this situation there's just no escape from because they can't even comprehend it. There's no there is like Tommy Chong plays like an old hermit who lives in the shack, but he's totally useless. Like they go to him for like one of the son of the family goes to him for like advice, and he's just like, I have no idea what's happening. He's just a bit of a stoned hippie, and I like the fact there's clearly no escape from this is not going to end well. Weirdly in it, Nicolas Cage, even before it all kicks off, I don't know what the direction to him was, but he just
I think it matters.
He just does impressions of Donald Trump, like just goes into his like vocal inflections and hand movements, and you think, why are you doing that? Like, and the way the kids react to it is like it's just him talking, and you think, yeah, but he's like a really meek man, and then when he suddenly gets a bit irate, he suddenly does impressions of Donald Trump.
That's amazing. But the thing is, you see, like that's the brilliance of Nicolas Cage is that he will be in this movie, and it's like you might think to yourself, "Oh, I'm not sure. It doesn't really sound like my kind of thing." Then as soon as someone says, "Oh, he just randomly does impressions of Donald Trump," it's like, well, you have to see it then, don't you? Because it's like that's too bizarre to possibly.
I realise that we've with that Mandy and Face Off with 3 Nicolas Cage films this week.
That's incredible.
That's really good. Yeah, so it's good. It didn't grab me as much as I'm not going to say too much about Mandy because I want you to see it first. But like that was right up my strata. But with the Color of Space, it felt like it could have been a bit shorter, and there were some scenes in it that you think, oh, crikey, Moses. Like Jolie Richardson is in it, and it's always good to see her again because women in Hollywood, they seem to just like do nothing in their 50s, don't they? It's like not many parts, so they kind of drop off the map. So it was good to see her in a film, like a good film. But and the relationship between the siblings and stuff is cool. But it's I don't know. Maybe I would watch it again if I was over your house and you checked it on. I would watch it again, but it's not one I would watch myself again. Whereas I would go straight back to Mandy.
Right. Yeah. I'm keen to watch both of them. I'll try and watch both of them before.
That'd be cool, actually. Before we do the next episode, yeah.
And then we'll get to talk about Nicolas Cage again. We might as well just throw in the Bad Lieutenant while we're about it.
Yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that.
Speaking of Werner Herzog,
he's not dead.
No, I watched Jack Reacher.
Oh yes,
we watched Jack Reacher. So now, this movie, I haven't seen the sequel, and I'm not even sure I'll bother with it. But with this, it feels so much like a 70s thriller, like in a way that I hadn't really noticed before. It's like the cinematography, like with the overhead shots and stuff like that. The kind of stylized use of lighting and shadows. And the opening sniper sequence almost felt like it was like kind of like the opening of The Conversation, where he's like, it's like a kind of just a shot of like a crowd, and you're not really sure what's going on, sort of thing. And it's got this faint kind of eerie, paranoid music going on. It was quite effective in that way. So and this, the script is sometimes quite pretty good when people are like having a
Is
go at each other.
Rosamund Pike in this?
Rosamund Pike is in this film, yes, and
Yes, that's
she
right.
is miscast. But yeah, the problem with the movie is Reacher himself, because I haven't read the books.
I haven't read the books, but I've read synopsis of a few of them,
Right.
and the character in and of itself really irritates me because who was the person who wrote the books?
Lee Child.
Right. It's when you read about it and what people like about Jack Reacher, you get the impression that it's like, oh my god, he's cool. He doesn't listen. He walks everywhere. He doesn't listen to music. He just thinks of music in his head. He's got a jukebox in his head, and you're like, what? And it's all the stuff that's like supposed to be cool, but it's just what?
Yes. Tom Cruise doesn't have the physical presence, because as far as I know, this guy is someone who's meant to be able to walk in a room and intimidate people just by being there, because he's so huge, sort of thing. Cruise doesn't have the physical presence, but he's also too charming. He's too nice to really sell the idea of a man who kind of lives outside of normal society and just can threaten people in that way. And as we've discussed before, and we will discuss now, there's that central scene where he's in an office with Rosamund Pike, and he's looking out the window at office workers, and he talks about how trapped they must feel in their lives. And that may well be true, fine. But he follows it up with the assumption that they would trade that feeling for his lifestyle. As in, and we're talking about, this is a man who lives the life of a drifter. He wanders.
He's really transient, isn't he?
Wanders aimless and completely lonely through the world, wanted by various gangsters and cops, never safe, never stable, unable to forge any kind of lasting relationships. And it just sounds like a nightmare. I'd rather have the sense of feeling a bit trapped, but also like quite safe, and just be able to enjoy myself and have relationships with people.
And also after that, he says a line after that, if I'm paraphrasing here, where they argue, Rosamund Pike says whatever she responds with, and he
like,
sort of loses temper. What are you talking about? And then he says, oh, there's a bus stop like 856 meters from here. I can be there and on the number X8 bus in 9.7 minutes. And you're like, is that impressive? What is that line of dialogue?
Yeah, it just sounds like
that you plan your public transport journeys well in advance. That's supposed to impress me.
So, and the problem with the film isn't even that Reacher himself is a bit of an a-hole. I mean, you don't need to like the protagonist in a movie. That's not necessary. There's a myth that you have to like the protagonist, because then you wouldn't have films like Scarface or Goodfellas. Split Second, or whatever. But they're great films, but they have unlikable main characters. But the point is that you either need to empathize with that character, or the script needs to find a way of questioning them and their actions, sort of thing. The problem with Jack Reacher is that you can't empathize with him, because he's obviously an enigma. He's like a drifter, so you can't empathize with his situation because he lives such a unique lifestyle, and he's also very emotionally closed down. So there's no empathy going on. So the problem with the film is then that, like you were alluding to earlier, it unquestionably offers Reacher as a hero, like a kind of force of nature, here to breeze past the bureaucracy and the protocol and get shit done. And so there's no questioning of his hero status. For example, right, in the film, you'll remember this bit. There's an awesome car chase, really good car chase, really physical, and Tom Cruise did all his driving in that, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful, beautiful sequence. At the end of that, the way he gets away is by hopping out while it's moving and letting the car kind of drift into traffic. Now, what he does then is he wanders into like a crowd of onlookers, wondering what the hell is going on with those police cars and this helicopter. But of course, they see this guy who like looks pretty mean, and he's just got out of this car on this massive police chase and walks into this crowd. He walks into this crowd, and they simply just help him without questioning him for a second.
Yeah, they just crowd around him. Doesn't someone give him his hat as well, or something?
Give him his hat, like he's one of them. And it's like, what? Why? He's this it's not like they'd recognize him because he's an outsider. So he's just some guy, a criminal. Then none of them are at all worried about the fact that he just stepped out of this vehicle after this massive chase.
Which is
And
drifting into traffic.
yeah, and he could be threatening. And I think that kind of points to what you were saying about like this, the attitude that's behind the film of this kind of the supposed appeal of Jack Reacher himself. And it's the most kind of like solipsistic male fantasy ever in a way. It's this fantasy of absolute control, but also independence.
No responsibility.
No responsibility, but also having absolute control over every situation. And in a way, it's kind of like a falsehood that's existed in Hollywood since day one, really. The kind of surly, aggressive male loner who rides into town, kicking ass, makes no friends, but fixes everything sort of thing, and then walks off again. You know, it's like the man with
The
no
thing
name.
is with those films, they never treat the audience with like the contempt, like, oh, you wish you were him.
Well, exactly. It's got that extra element.
So the fact that it goes into that depth, and I just spent the whole film watching it and the sequel, just thinking, if we can move past that, not everyone wants to have that life. If like you and I both did, we watch the film. If you're not impressed by him or jealous of him, then he just comes across as like pathetic and irritating. There are so many lines of dialogue in the film where people would just say, "Can you shut up, Jack? Like, you're not impressing."
Usually in these films where there is this kind of man with no name walking into town, the script will kind of provide a counterpoint to this idea of the man being a faultless hero. Like it will be like, well, you know, he saved the town, but in the end, he's lonely, he's lost someone, whatever.
At a real personal cost.
Yes, but and like you say, and it especially needs that. If the script is going to go out of its way to push his condescending worldview on us, the sheep watching it, sort of thing, then it needs it even more. But it goes out of its way to say, oh, well, actually, this is the kind of hero we really need, kind of guy who's not going to follow rules. And why she gets involved with him in the first place, this, like, you know, she's a lawyer, isn't she? So, so that was pretty bad. And it was something you mentioned earlier as well about, like, which brings us right back to the start. In fact, you talk about like the efficiency of like in Taken, like just taking down people, sort of thing, taking them out as quickly and efficiently as possible, so they're not a threat. Near the end of Jack Reacher, I know it's not 20 years old, but it's not really too much of a spoiler. But he basically squares off against one of his main rivals, sort of thing.
Whose name is Jay Courtney.
It is.
Thank you.
He's as amazing as ever. And so he comes up to him and like he successfully manages to like evade him, and he's got a gun to his head, basically. Jack Reacher has a gun to his head. So he's like completely got the upper hand. He gets the guy to chuck the gun away. And up to this point, Jack Reacher's just been doing everything just to stay alive, do everything he can just to, you know, just to do whatever is needed in the most efficient way possible. But of course, in this sequence, he has a gun to his head and he decides to make him turn around, and then Jack Reacher tosses his gun away so that they can have like a proper fist fight in the rain. And it's like, so it doesn't even make sense on a level of his character, because why would he do that anyway? But on top of that, there's a slightly uncomfortable sense that he almost admires him in a way, that he's his ultimate nemesis. So therefore, he wouldn't be able to do anything as dishonorable as that. This is the same guy who has just sniped 5 completely innocent people, by the way. And yet Jack Reacher is like, has some sort of weird admiration for him. It's bizarre. Yeah. There's no reason for him to feel that he's like some sort of equal or like ultimate nemesis.
I feel like we should watch the second one as well.
Yeah.
Because you're bringing all these feelings back that I'd suppressed where I was watching it, and usually I think when I watch, because it's effectively at its core just like a trashy action film, and when I watch those films like from the days of yore, there's kind of like this kind of weird innocent, or like sort of they're just out of their time now, you know. But this is a modern film.
Yes.
And and
a throwback in some ways, I suppose, to those sorts of values in a way. But you know, like we watched not so long ago, we watched To Live and Die in LA.
Yes.
Right? Which again is very much a 70s style movie in I'd say not say modern clothing, but mid 80s clothing. But it was very much in the same vein as those sorts of movies. And again, you got in that film, it's very clever in the way that you're kind of seduced by a quite unlikable man, really. He's quite a womanizer. He's just grotesque, misogynist. He's violent. He doesn't play by the rules, and
he's got unmanageable hair.
And he's sort of out for revenge and all that kind of thing. So he's got all these like quite repugnant characteristics, but he is also like he is also seductive in the way that he kind of persuades through his partner, persuades you that you could get sucked into that life, sort of thing. And the way that it very cleverly like that film opens with him doing something extremely like decent and honorable by trying to talk down a terrorist, sort of thing. And you think, all right, he's a decent guy who's got a brain, sort of thing. So you instantly think, right, this is a decent man who there's decency underneath anyway. So, and that's planted in your head for the whole film, sort of thing. And you watch his kind of like moral decline throughout the film. But of course, in Jack Reacher, there's no. That's what I mean about there being no questioning of it. It never ever plays with that that notion of what the kind of morally grey hero is. It's like he is a hero. You're meant to admire him. You're meant to fall in love with him. He's meant to be charming because he just says it like it is.
Yeah, he's saying what we're all thinking.
Mm.
He's doing what we all want to do. But yeah, that central sequence looking at the office was really problematic because it was just really misjudged. And I could just imagine, like, I'd love to have seen a camera on that sequence in the cinema facing the audience with night vision, so you could just see hundreds of furrowed brows for just a split second.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the time and just thinking, no, I really not. I don't find your lifestyle appealing at all in any way. I'd much rather be working in that office than where you are now.
Yeah, judging the distance of bus stops from yourself.
Yeah, so that's it. Yeah, that's all I had to say about that.
Well, I think that was a pretty chock-a-block first episode of this.
Really.
Yeah, The Men Who Talk. And what was this? What's the show called? We haven't actually set it up yet. We're recording this before. It's just The Men Who Talk, State of Play, and Kino Kingdom.
Kino Kingdom.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have to look up what the word Kino means. Maybe I won't.
It's like a sort of pretentious word for film, but I guess it comes from kinetoscope.
Crikey. So yeah, that's it. I mean, have you got
creepy things anyway? But yeah.
Have you got? I mean, I haven't got anything. I'm in the middle now of watching Motherless Brooklyn, so I'm going to finish that tonight.
Oh yeah, that's Edward Norton's. I don't know if it's his directorial debut, but he did direct it, didn't he?
Yeah, I think I'm about. It's quite long. It's like 2.5 hours. I think I'm an hour and a half into it, so there's no left. I hate watching films in two halves, but I was so tired last night. I turned it off at like 2 a.m. But yeah, so I've got nothing. I might watch Jack Reacher 2 now, just because it's fresh in my mind and it's irritating me. So I could just watch that.
The only bit of Jack Reacher 2 I've seen is a clip I saw on Reddit where someone like jumps down from a first floor balcony or something like that, and lands, and it's just. They didn't even bother hiding like the crash mat. He just lands and the crash mat like billows up, sort of thing. It's like that man just jumped on a crash mat, like, and then ran off. Like,
well, if that's the level, you're just selling it to me more and more. I'm just gonna want to watch it now. Have you got any films lined up that you know you're going to watch over the coming week?
I don't think I've got anything particularly lined up, so it'll have to be a surprise for next time. I have ordered a few weird oddities. In the post, but some strange horror films, because I thought it's been a while since I've expanded my horror movie collection, so really obscure stuff. So yeah,
so really obscure, total shag.
Yeah. So and like so I'll definitely deliver my verdict on them.
Okay, what we'll do then. What we'll do is if we start again, I'll start recording and then we'll go through that again without being the test run. So that could be good.
Okay.
Right, here we go then. So split second. Cool. That's it. Unless you've got anything else you want to get off your chest.
Oh, and of course we have another action movie day this week, don't we? So
yes, on Thursday. So it's your turn to choose. You haven't actually told us what it is yet, have you? Are you going to say the secret?
I did have a look. I was thinking, well, what can it be? I was thinking Well, I noticed that on Prime they do have Dead End Drive-In, which is a very good 80s kind of like apocalyptic horror action thing. But I think it's too good to be watching one of these nights. So we need something. Basically, we need something to see Thomas Howell. I think we got it.
Yeah, there's a few on there I admire. To be honest, because I logged in first on the last action movie night last Thursday, I was just when I put up Split Second, I was just scrolling through like the suggestions. If you like that, you'll love these, and some of them were startling. So
There was half a second. There was 3/4 of a second.
It was
Brilliant.
give me 2 seconds.
Just kidding.
So yeah, I'll love you and leave you then, and yeah, that's the first episode of Kino Kingdom. It went pretty well, I think.
Lovely stuff. Okay. Till the
Okay.
next time.
Love you.
Bye. Bye for now.